Hi folks. The other day my wife came to me in preparation for the upcoming holidays to ask me to make some cookie cutter type cutouts so she could do some clay projects for the grandchildren. I thought that it actually might be very helpful to do a very introductory video to help similar type minded crafters perform a fairly routine project like making a cookie cutter type stencil using, in this case, a freeware program, FeeCAD. This video was intended to help absolute beginners. Almost everyone who uses FeeCAD on a routine basis would already know how to do this. But a crafter who does not live in the world of computer-assisted design might have a little bit of problem with this, and it might be a bit daunting. These programs, admittedly, are not the easiest to use. So let's get to it. First of all, I live in a Mac world, but I would think that the process I'm going to be doing here is pretty similar to that on a Windows machine. So the first thing we have to do is we have to have a picture or a template of what cookie cutter you wish to do. So I'd gone and found a pretty straightforward cookie cutter shape of a snowman on the internet. I downloaded it, and there we have it. A pretty straightforward image of a cookie cutter. Now the workflow is taking this shape, bringing it into a CAD program, drawing the outline, and then creating a cutter from that outline. So the first thing is to take this shape and import it into the drawing program, the CAD program, so we can do that. Now, the first thing I'm going to do here, which you very well may have to do, is I'm going to cut this down a little bit because we're going to have to tell the program later how big we want this image to be. So first and foremost, let me go ahead and make it just a little bit easier to size, and you'll understand this in a few minutes. Now, I'm not going to draw the arms simply because I don't really need to for the purposes of this video. But okay, so now we've got our drawing. And the next step then is to open FeeCAD. There are many videos on how to download FeeCAD, how to open FeeCAD, how to make your preferences in FeeCAD. And I'm not going to go through that here because this video is really designed for people to just get the project done with minimal understanding of any aspects of FeeCAD. So we start with, of course, we got to make a new file, right? We have to open a file to create our program in. So we open a file, and we see on the side here something called the combo view. I'm going to come back to this because this tells us the tasks that are being done. This area here is the area that we're going to see our design, and this area here is going to actually let us rotate the drawing around so we can see it from different perspectives. So let's go ahead and import an image. Bring the image into the program so we can draw over it. So we go to File, Import, find our snowman, and we open it. Ah, look at the snowman. But you notice it's a little bit at an angle. That's because FeeCAD defaults its view to looking at it in 3D. Well, we want to look at the snowman like we're looking down on a piece of paper. So up here you can see the cube, it says top. We'll click on the top, and now we're looking straight down at the snowman. Now if we go over to the combo view, we have tasks, things we want to do, and what the model looks like. Ah, there's the snowman. Now we want to size the picture to be about the size of the cutter we want to make. To do that, we double click on the snowman, and look, we see this little window here, and at the bottom, image size, width, height, and keep aspect ratio. So I want to make the snowman about 2.5 inches wide. So I'm going to go to wide, and I'm just going to tell it to make it 80 millimeters. I use millimeters and not inches, but you can have it changed otherwise. And you'll notice the image has resized. We click OK, and now we're ready to start drawing the snowman. To draw the snowman, FeeCAD has what are called workbenches. You see where my mouse is up here in the corner. The drop-down menu lists different workbenches. These are different sub-programs that let you do slightly different things. So we're going to start with what is called the Part Design workbench. Now, I don't want to get heavily into this because I want you just to be able to follow along. But FeeCAD defines any object that is created in terms of either being a body or a part. So, but that's really, if you just follow along, you're not going to need to do much. So now we have a snowman. And our first thing we want to do now is we want to create a sketch. Well, first thing we want to do though, like I said, is we have to create something to hold the sketch. So for the purposes of this video, we go up here to this little guy here and we create a body. The body is going to be what the cutter actually is. So we've created a body. You'll notice the body is highlighted. Now we want to sketch on top of this image. So right here, it says create a sketch. So let's click create a sketch. And it asks me what base plane. Well, to make this pretty straightforward, when you look down on something, like looking down at a piece of paper, that almost always is XY. X being side to side, Y being up and down. Of course, that can change depending on where you hold the paper. But essentially, we're looking down on the sketch, so we're going to use the XY plane. So now we have a sketch area with the snowman. Now, what we do is we draw the sketch. So as we think about drawing the sketch, what we have to understand a little bit about are the drawing tools. And there are many drawing tools up here in the toolbar, which is what we call this here. We got a straight line, we got a square, we got a slot, we got a circle. Well, the best tool to draw a complex shape like this with curves is what is called the B-spline. Don't worry about the names. Just know it's that guy right there. And it's called a B-spline. So we click it, create B-spline, and look, our cursor has now changed to kind of a curvy line. So now let's draw our snowman. But you go, oh, wait a minute. The snowman isn't really very centered. Well, that can actually be fixed because we can move the snowman image left or right. I'm not going to bother with that here because it's not particularly important to, you can read about this. So, okay, so we're going to draw the snowman, or more correctly, we're going to draw half of the snowman. So, we take our cursor. Now you'll notice when I move over that center line that goes up and down, you'll see that it changes color. The line changes color. And there's a little half circle with a red dot in it. See, right there? That means when I left click it starts a point for a line. So look, I'm going to come here and I'm going to create by left clicking different points. Now you'll notice that the lines are straight. Don't worry about that. That will be changed later because it will automatically know enough to make those changes. So here I am. I'm just drawing around, clicking wherever I want a control point. And I'm going to end also right there by making the line yellow to make sure that my points are on the center line. I'm going to click the last point. Now, to stop the line, you either hit the right mouse button or hit escape. So I'm going to hit the escape button. Voila. And you'll see that the lines have become somewhat circular. Now you'll notice that my cursor still has the B-spline. If you hit escape again, it goes away. Well, now you don't particularly like the way this looks. What do you do about that? Well, these are where these little clicks that you did come into play. Well, let's make them a little bit fatter. So I'm going to pull that click out like that. I'm going to grab this control point. I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this control point, maybe move that in a little bit. Take this control point, move it out a little bit. This control point out a little bit. We got his hat. So basically you can move these around to get the image or to get the shape of the snowman that you really want. See? Just play with it to get it right. So now you've got it where you want it. Well, now you've got half the snowman drawn. Well, what next? Well, remember you've hit escape. Your mouse is now just a pointer. You want to make a mirror image of that sketch on the other side of that center line. So take your mouse, take your pointer, click on the line, and the line turns green. So if we're going to make a mirror image of this line, we have to tell it what to make a mirror image of. So we've made the line green by selecting it. Now we're going to click, after we click on the line, we're going to click on the center line. You see it's turned yellow. Click it again. It's turned a different shade of green. And now we're going to tell the program to make a mirror image of that line across that axis point. To do that, when I look over here, there's something you can find called the symmetry tool. If you can't see it up in the toolbar, you can go up here under Tools, and you can find in the sketch bar something that says under Sketcher Tools, Symmetry. So you see what I did? Sketch, Sketcher Tools, Symmetry. It's the same thing as there. It's just in a slightly different place. Symmetry. Boop. And look what's happened. We've created a mirror image of the sketch. Now, of course, it's not lined up with the image because we didn't move the image in the middle. But for the purposes of a cookie cutter here, I don't think that's a huge issue. So what's next? Where do we go from here? Well, for FreeCAD to be happy, there has to be a closed sketch. If there's not a closed sketch, nothing will ever be what they call rendered. Well, it turns out that when it created this symmetrical line, it did not attach these 2 points. Let me show you. I'm going to click on the line, hold down my right button, mouse button, and look. You can see they're not connected. But we can fix that. We can fix that by clicking on the dot on the first control point there, clicking on the second control point there, and going up to the bar to hit what's called constraint coincident. It brings those 2 points together. Watch. Now they're one. Up here, it's the same thing. So we have to bring those 2 points together. Hit this constraint coincident, and voila, now it's joined. But I've just noticed something. Moving that little point out of the way changed the geometry. You go, uh-oh, because look, it's a little bit off, isn't it? So, Control Z undoes it. Ah, look what happened. So let's do it again to make sure it's right. Let's find a way to move it so it doesn't change dramatically. Well, there we go. Hit there, coincident restraints, and that's pretty close. You see those there? That's pretty good. So I think we're good now. Now it's one complete sketch that's completely closed, and we can move forward. Now over here under tasks, you'll see this thing called degrees of freedom, 64 degrees of freedom under constrained. In any CAD program, it is very important that the program knows where each point is in space. Well, for the purposes of what we're doing here, that is not important. We don't have to do that. So let's go ahead then, and we want to close the sketch. Oh, but wait a minute. Where did the sketch go? Well, it turns out that the sketch is basically being hidden by the image of the snowman. Well, what do we do about that? Well, we go over to the Model tab, make sure the model is blue. We click on the snowman. See, it turned green in the middle there. And now if we simply press the space bar, the snowman will go away. Pressing the space bar makes selected things appear and disappear. So I'm going to hit the space bar. The image is gone, and we see the outline now because the image is gone. So here we have the body, and here we have the sketch. So now we're ready, of course, to take this sketch and now make it essentially three-dimensional. How do we do that? Well, it's a truism with FreeCAD. There are multiple ways to do any single thing within FreeCAD. As a freeware program that is part of a design community, people have written many elements that are the same or do slightly different things in different types of programs, subprograms, meaning workbenches. But I'm just going to go ahead and walk you through any one of a number of ways to do that. So what we're going to do, because I have found it more reliable, we are going to move from the part design workbench to the part workbench. So what's changed is the type of tools that are available. And that's because the one tool I want to use to do this is in the part workbench and not in any of the other workbenches. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is basically select the sketch. And we can do it by double clicking on the line. and making it turn green, or we can simply click on the sketch over in the combo view. So we've now selected the sketch, it's green, and what we want to do now is we want to make a duplication of this outline, but spaced apart. And the tool to use this in the part workbench is called a 2D offset. Well, how do you find that? Well, you come up here to the very top, you go to part, and down here you see something called a 2D offset. You click that and watch what happens. Basically there are now two lines separated by a distance. That distance between the two lines will be how thick the cutter is. So over here in the tasks, a window is shown up after we did 2D offset, and it says offset 1 millimeter. Mode and arc, don't worry about those, but this lets you either make the cookie cutter thicker by going, let's say, to 2 millimeters. See, it got thicker. Or if you want to put it on the inside, you put a minus in front of that. Now, sometimes you'll find that you have to do one or the other depending upon the complexity. But for right now, this is going to work fine. We've put the second outline 2 millimeters outside. Well, we actually have a very cool little thing here called fill offset. What that does is it fills in the distance between those two lines. So now we have a solid object that looks like a cutter. So we click OK, and you'll notice in the combo view in the model, there's now something called the 2D offset, and that's that new cutter thickness shape that we've made. Well, now we want to make it, we want to grow it. We want to make it move from the table up. In other words, we want to give it height. And in FeeCAD, we select the object by clicking on 2D offset in the model tab. And there's a tool called extrude. So now we're extruding this flat image up outside of where the paper is. In other words, we're making a 3D object. So now we go ahead, we've selected the 2D offset, we click extrude, and now we have a whole other number of things in the tasks. Most of this you don't have to worry about, but this is the thing here. Because it's extruding, it's basically length. I know it should be height. It should seem like height. But if you think about extruding something through, like, say, a bag of icing, it's really length in their mind. But because this image is on a flat plane, length actually makes it high. So now it's about how high, how big, how thick do you want the cookie cutter above the table. So let's make it 20 millimeters, which is, just about 3/4 of an inch or so. Okay, click OK. And you go, well, okay, now what's that? Well, now this is where the cube comes in. You can now turn this around so you can look at it. Look at that. We now have a cookie cutter. Look at that. Sometimes when a model is rendered, you see that black area there? It's because the model imperfectly renders. If that ends up being a problem, this is where you might then move the line to the inside. So what you can do is go to the model, click extrude, double click on 2D offset, and let's put a minus there and see what happens. Look, the black went away. By moving it, by taking the line from the outside into the inside, the model has rendered more perfectly. And we can see, in fact, that we have a pretty cool looking cookie cutter to make clay figures with, or whatever you would like to do, even to draw with on the inside. So I guess the obvious question is, what's next? You've created this cutter or this stencil, and what do you do with it? Well, that depends really on what your purpose is. In my particular case, when my wife came to ask me to do this for her, I have a 3D printer, so my intention, of course, was to then export this in a way that my 3D printer could then print this out for her to use. And I think that's the most obvious thing that people would do in this case. I do want to make a comment, though. I've been using the term cookie cutter, and I don't really mean cookie cutter, because 3D printers, their filaments and the brass really isn't considered to be food safe. So I don't think I would ever use a 3D printed object like this to actually cut cookies. But as my wife is cutting clay, it's really not a problem. So what's next? So what do we do now? We've got our cookie cutter. It's the right size. We've indexed it correctly. We've extruded it, and we've made the cutter. Well, what do we do next? Well, we then click over in the model section. We click on what we want to actually send to the 3D printer. Now, I have found that you can't always predict what needs to be selected to export, so you might have to play around a little bit. So we'll just go ahead and just click on this image. Let's click on the extrude. If we click on the extrude and we export it, we're going to export it as an STL mesh. And that is the standard way that you send things to a 3D printer. So we'll save it, export it, open it, because we can open it on a Mac just by clicking on it. And look, we have now exported a cutter. Now you notice there's some rendering areas here, but those aren't going to affect it because look, the inside is clean. The outside isn't such a big worry from the point of view of the inside of the cookie cutter. And then from there, we just send it on to our 3D printer. Okay, well, I hope this has been helpful. And like I said, there are so many videos on the use of FreeCAD that you can really learn all that you need to know by just looking at videos. But I thought this might be helpful. Again, well, thank you all for paying attention, and I hope this has been helpful. Well, this would be a good time of any to talk about, again, how you can do different processes differently in different workbenches. So in this particular case, let's go back and let me just show you how you can accomplish something very close to the same thing in a different way. So I want to go back and just start with the sketch. To do that, one can simply just delete the things that we've created. And now we're back to just the body of the snowman and the sketch. Go back to top down by clicking on the navigation cube. And let's go ahead and be in a different workbench. Instead of being in the part workbench, let's go into the part design workbench. So now we're in the part design workbench. We go back to the model tab, which gives us our model. We click on the sketch. Now, once again, this is just a simple sketch. It's just two-dimensional. But now we want to take that sketch and give it height. The way one does that in the part design workbench is something called padding. So let's go ahead and pad it. Now here we have our options in the combo view, and the length is the same as with extrude, in our case the height. Let's make it 20 millimeters. Click OK. And we can see that we have a three-dimensional object. So let's go back to the top. Now we have this three-dimensional object, and we want to hollow it out to create the cookie cutter. The way you do that in the part design workbench is you select the pad, which is the padded object. Go to tasks, click on the part of the object that you want to hollow. So we're looking down on the top. We want to hollow the top. We click on it, in this case twice, and we get an option called thickness. By clicking on thickness, we see that what we've created is essentially the same thing with a cookie cutter, has a top on it. It's hollowed out the object, say for 1 millimeter on all of the sides. You can increase the thickness, and you can see that it gets thicker as we go along. And now we've essentially created a cutter, but with a solid surface. And we can then export this as a file to be 3D printed. Now, the reason why I didn't review this option first is that complex shapes will have difficulty in rendering using this process. Sketch, going to the part design workbench to pad to thickness. Well, okay, I think that's about it. Any questions, you just let me know. Thanks very much, folks. Hope you enjoyed it.